Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time to do my Week 8 power rankings for the 2024 United Football League season. This past week was a very big deal. We had not one, not two, not three, but four teams find out their postseason fate. Now, while one seeds are still up for grabs, we did find another team that has clinched a postseason berth and three that have been eliminated. And this has been a crazy week. Thanks to a couple of the upsets and a couple of games on how they ended, how they played, who played, and all that. Some people have teams really high after this week, and some have them, well, really low. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on the power rankings, starting off with number 8, the Memphis Showboats. Look, I did a whole rant video on them, I believe that's the one that's coming out earlier today. There's not really much to talk about with this team. This team got absolutely hammered by the Renegades. It wasn't even close. Look, the Renegades pwned them, 47-23. This was an annihilation. The Showboats played two quarterbacks again. Granted, it was mainly due to injury, but they still played two different quarterbacks, and again, it didn't work. The Renegades just fully outplayed them. Look, the Showboats are the worst team in turnover differential, in offensive stats, and defensive stats. Whether it be their insane yards allowed or their worst points allowed in the league, whether it be their offense not even being able to put up 250 a game, whether it be the fact they have 16 giveaways. It's just, this team's terrible. I mean, Dawood Davis and Vinny Papale did exactly what you expected them to, and everybody else did, well, nothing. Again, Darius Victor had another game where overall he didn't play all that great. He had one 15-yard rush, but aside from that, basically nothing. And even then, a lot of it is on coaching. When he was doing good rushes, they decided to stop doing it. I mean, this team is bad. They're clearly number 8. Now, going into their MVP, the team MVP is going to be Dawood Davis. Again, this was basically between him and Vinny Papale, and that's pretty much it. I really don't see an argument for anyone else. And I would say that Davis is the MVP because of the fact that he has had a couple massive receptions that have kept him in games. Now, Papale has a great argument, especially for some of the clutch catches he had in week 1 and 2. But overall, Davis is 7th in the entire league in receiving yards, 4th in receptions, tied for 6th in receiving TDs, and 3rd in yards after catch. He has had one of the longest plays of the season as an 82-yard bomb. And again, he's been a very solid, dependable player. The past couple weeks especially, he's been a monster. And while he's having to play with two different quarterbacks, he's still performing at a very high level. At the end of the day, yes, guys like Jay Adams and Sage Surratt have been on and off, whether it be mainly because of their quarterback play and all that. But Davis has been an elite player for a decent part of the season now, and is probably going to be one of those guys that everybody kind of forgets about because, well, his team is pretty terrible. He's the team MVP. Number 7 is going to be the Houston Roughnecks again. Yes, the Roughnecks, I'm going to be sticking them at 7 again. Look, this game against the Brahmas was ugly. I mean, I talked about it before, or this was the video that's coming out after this, but I'll talk about it tomorrow in the Roughnecks eliminated video. This is the ugliest team to watch. This team's offense is abysmal. Look, Curtis Johnson may think is the best offense in the league, but once again, Mark Thompson really didn't do anything. Look, he had one good run. Look at that stat line. 38 yards, a 36-yard long. That is an abysmal stat line. You get rid of that long, that is 8 attempts for 2 yards. That is horrid. TJ Pledger, not much better. Jarrett Garantano, yes, I know he was tough playing through injury, but even he really didn't play that well. Sinnett came in, 2 for 2 was good, but at the end of the day, he only threw 2 passes. They didn't really do much, and they lost the game on a last-second field goal because they fumbled the kickoff. They allowed 12 points in the fourth quarter. This team couldn't score a touchdown. They kicked field goal after field goal after field goal. They had 4 turnovers for the Brahmas. The Brahmas had 4 turnovers. And they somehow, some way, lost this game. They had 1 at the very end of the game, and they lost. They were 0-2 in the red zone. The defense did its job. The defense held the Roughnecks held the Brahmas as much as they could. At the end of the day, this game was on the Roughnecks offense, once again failing, once again falling short, once again not doing its job. The defense did everything they could to get the Roughnecks the W. It was just like a 2022 Gamblers game. The Roughnecks D did everything they could, and in the end, they were forced to stay on the field for almost the entire fourth quarter, got insanely tired, and even then were still able to hold the Brahmas to field goals. And in the end, the Brahmas basically got the ball in field goal range thanks to the fumble and then kicked the game-winning field goal to end the game, and thus ending the Roughnecks season. This Roughnecks team is bad. They lost to a bad quarterback in Quentin Dormady. Granted, he got benched and Kevin Hogan played much better when he came in. But this team is just terrible. They're number 7. It's just that the Showboats defense is just so awful, and their offense is so terrible that this Roughnecks team that at least has a defense, they got one spot above them. Their team MVP I'm putting is Chris Odom. Look, there's multiple guys you really could make an argument for, so if he's not your MVP, I do understand it, but I'm going to go with Odom. Look, he's been kind of unsung hero type of player this past, few weeks compared to what he was in 2022. But whereas a lot of other guys either are dealing with injuries or are very much underperforming how they did in 2022, Chris Odom's actually playing pretty well. Remember, this is a guy who's basically just coming off a torn ACL. He had a torn ACL, once he got signed to the Browns after the 2022 season, and this is his first football he's played. And he has 5 sacks in the 6 games that he has played. That's not bad. That's pretty damn good. 7 TFLs. That is tied for first in the league in TFLs and tied for third in sacks. 2 forced fumbles, 22 tackles overall. He's been playing very well. Yes, I know Reuben Foster early on was playing incredible, but I'm going to go with Chris Odom for the team MVP. The fact is that he has been incredible. If he had been healthy, not dealing with those minor injuries, he might be even better. And the fact is that he still is one of the best edge rushers in the entire league, despite coming off a torn ACL. Look at Channing Stribling. He was dealing with injuries, and it's to the point where he's not really on a roster at all, bouncing on from maybe getting on a team to not being on one. Other guys are like that as well. Whereas Chris Odom has basically come back to be a really good player. And again, if he plays a full season, that's, still about 8 sacks he's on pace for, about 8, 7.5, 8.5, and that's a great season. Odom is probably the team MVP. I have him as it. I know some would argue that, but he's my team MVP for the Roughnecks. Number 6 is the Arlington Renegades. Look, I've seen some people actually say this team is number 4 in the league. And the crazy part is I don't fully discount that. I could buy that argument, but no, they're 6. Look, they got 1 win against the team I expected them to win. Yes, I expected them to only win by 8. I didn't expect them to get the blowout, but they did. Luis Perez, incredible. 27 of 32 for 298, 3 TDs, 0 interceptions. Yeah, how about that for a bad quarterback that a lot of people said was bad? Yeah, he's not bad. He is easily top 3 quarterback. Davion Smith, he did have that 46-yard long, but overall he played an incredible game. 2 rushing TDs, insanely good game. Sal Cannella, 9 receptions for 72 yards. Davion Smith had 35 yards receiving. Javante Payton had 82 yards receiving and a couple of touchdowns. The Renegades scored 6 total touchdowns this game. They have the league leader in passing yards in Luis Perez. Juan Manigo is the leader in kick return yards, 752. This team is the second best passing offense in terms of yards per game at 229.7. And when you look at what they did against the Showboats, like I showed earlier, they just obliterated them. They had over 100 more yards of total yardage. Their third down percentage was incredible at 6 out of 8. Even though they did have a decent amount of penalties, they just overall fully outplayed the Showboats. This team is a really solid team. The fact is that people are saying this team is, awful. They're really not awful. This team lost a bunch of very tight games to the point where it is true. If they didn't have a fourth quarter, this team would be in the championship game picture. But because they struggled so hard in the fourth quarter, they ended up missing the playoffs. But for a team that missed the playoffs, there is a very real possibility that come week 10 or when we go to that playoff power rankings, that this team could be above multiple teams in the power rankings that have made the playoffs. That's the kind of team they are. They very well could play spoiler teams at the end of the season. They are the number 6 team in the league. Their MVP is Perez. Who else is it going to be? Luis Perez is unarguably a top 3 QB in the league. It's basically, at this point, it's Adrian Martinez, Adrian McCarron, Luis Perez. That's your top 3. Luis Perez is first in passing yards, second in completion percentage, fourth in yards per pass, tied for third in passing TDs, tied for 7th in interception, so really solid there, and 4th in passer rating. He's throwing the ball downfield. This is a guy that was called a game manager before the season, and all he's done is prove why he's a great quarterback. If it wasn't for that one bad game he had against the Roughnecks, oh my gosh, his stats would be even better than this. He has been an incredible quarterback. The issue is, again, his defense has let him down a lot. His special teams has let him down before. And while he himself, has had drives that didn't end in TDs, he had the one where Sal Cannella had a penalty. You've had issues before. But overall, when you look at it, this dude is a very, very, very good player. And there's only so much he can really do on this team. His O-line, he's been able to somehow work around it, despite people still to this day not really saying it's a great line. He's only been sacked 10 times, which is not bad. That's a really good amount. So he's able to do a lot of things very well. He is an incredibly gifted quarterback and is definitely one of the best spring football quarterbacks really ever in terms of the modern day. And the fact is that if he does not get an NFL call, If he's back with the Renegades next year, watch out, league. Because this Renegades team, with a slightly better receiving core with this guy, they're going to be scary. Now, coming in at number 5 is going to be the DC Defenders. Look, this was tough to decide what to do with them. It really was. Again, I could see an argument for you to drop them farther, to drop them a ton, and hell, even move them up one spot. But I'm putting them at 5. They got beat by Michigan. They got beat. Now, yes, the offensive line could not stop anything, right? The Panthers may have only had 3 sacks, but they were getting pressure the entire game. They had to go to their third-string quarterback in Jalen McClendon, who honestly played pretty serviceably. And like I said before, I believe this is a guy that can start in the league, and I expect that if Francois and Teamu's injuries end up being pretty severe, I would not be shocked to see McClendon potentially lead this team to a couple of, shock wins at the end of the season. Fact is, Teamu statistically played a really solid game until he got hurt, but when you were watching it, you would not imagine he was going 10 for 14 for 127 yards. It just didn't feel that way. Look, the Panthers just outplayed DC. It's what it was. DC had a turnover. Michigan didn't. Michigan got stifled in the red zone many times. They went for it in 4th down and didn't convert. But the defenders went for it a couple times, didn't work. They wasted a challenge, like always. They just got outplayed. It's just that simple. DC, they're one of the worst teams in the league at running the ball. 79.4 yards is the 3rd worst in the league. Their points allowed is the 3rd worst in the league as well. They have an overall poor defense, and they have a rushing attack that is terrible. This team has issues that, much like the Showboats, they really never addressed enough. And while they had some weeks, it's just, they let the Panthers just obliterate them. Colburn went off. This was another week where the DC defense couldn't stop anyone that was running the football, which is why they've allowed over 123 yards on the ground. DC just was not that good. They're still in the playoff race, but it's very much a on life support race. They could be eliminated this next week. Number 5 is DC. Now, their team MVP, I'm going with Chris Rowland. Look, this is probably the hardest one to pick from because it's like Kelvin Harmon really has only popped off the last couple of weeks. But I'm going to go with Rowland. Look, he leads the entire league in all-purpose yards. He's 8th in punt return yards, 2nd in kick return yards, and he has had a few decent receptions. He does still have 152 receiving yards with a 16.9 average yards per reception. That's not bad. And again, he leads the entire league in all-purpose yards. That's a really solid stat. This is a great returner. It's hard to pick anybody else. Teamu has not lived up to the hype that we had for him heading into this season, so you can't put him as the team MVP. What running back has played well? Has there been anyone on defense that you can say is clearly a clear-cut superstar? I would say no. There are guys who are great, but not one that I would say is a clear-cut superstar. I will say you could make an argument for Matt McCrane. If you do, I agree with that. But, we all know there's going to be a kicker on this list, and it would be pretty crazy to do another kicker, even though you could very well make the argument for him. But I'm going to go with Chris Rowland. Again, you can easily put Matt McCrane as our team MVP. I'm just going to go with Rowland. Now, number 4 is the San Antonio Brahmas. Yes, the Brahmas stay at number 4. Why? Well, they actually did a good coaching decision. Look, the past couple weeks have been pretty critical on A.J. Smith and Wade Phillips because admittedly, and I think we all can agree, they've made some really poor coaching decisions, whether it be certain plays or certain decisions to punt the ball or challenge stuff. They've been pretty bad the past couple weeks, but the decision to bench Dormade late in the game was a fantastic one. Look, I let people try and make me think he was better than what he was. Sadly, I was exactly right about Quentin Dormade heading into the season. I said he was an overrated quarterback that people hyped up because he had garbage time stats I didn't say garbage time, but because he had quote-unquote good stats with a bad Guardians team. Guess what? He clearly was an overrated quarterback. He was bad again today, or in this game. 10 of 24. 142 yards is not bad on 10 completions, but 10 of 24 is horrific. An interception, terrible. 83 passer rating. That's a college passer rating, by the way, like we've talked about before. Terrible. Kevin Hogan may have only went 5 of 7, but when he went into the game, you can all agree if you saw this game, the offense immediately looked better. As soon as he was put in, it was like, okay, this offense is legit. When Dormade was in it, it was a joke. When Hogan was in it was legit. John Lovett didn't even play that good. I first guessed that he was going to have an off game today in this game. He did. It didn't matter. This team put up 241 total yards and won. They won because their kicker was able to make a couple great kicks at the end of the game to win it. They won because Kevin Hogan played just good enough. They won it because of a bad fumble by the Roughnecks. Again, I see why people move this team down. This was a horrific win. This is another one of those Brahmas W's that strikes no fear into any other team. It's just like the Showboats. It's just like the Defenders in Week 1. This is their third victory where it is not at all impressive. It is just not impressive. But what is impressive is the coaching decision. That's why they're still at 4. If they had stuck with Dormady and lucked into this win, they moved down. But because they went to Hogan and realized, hey, Dormady just is not that guy. If Dormady starts this next week, the Brahmas will not make it to the title game. I think we can all agree with that. If they start Dormady this next week, the Brahmas don't make it to the championship game. They're going to get annihilated by St. Louis. If they start Hogan, they have a shot. The fact is Hogan is a better QB than Dormady. So this is a move that, if they stick with it, which they probably are going to, considering the fact that, like I said, Hogan, without having any real reps with the first team guys, immediately looked better than Dormady did. Come on. That's why this team is at 4. And, of course, their defense. I mean, we can't not talk about it. It's still one of the best units in the league. 111 points allowed. That's a really damn good number right there. 24 sacks is incredible. And, of course, the only issue, though, is that they give the ball away a lot. Their 13 total turnovers is one of the worst in the league, but their -4 turnover differential is the second worst in the league. So, Brahmas at 4. Now, what about their team MVP? I'm going to go with Jordan Mosley. You know how their defense is really good? This is pretty much the easiest guy to mention. Mosley is first in the league in tackles at 55, second in solo tackles at 37, and is tied for first in fumble recoveries at 2. He has been a field general. This is the type of guy that, like if you were a USFL fan like a Frank Gidno was. Not a guy that's going to go rush the passer for 5 sacks, not somebody who's going to get 6 interceptions. He's going to play linebacker like you're supposed to. Stop the run, stop these short passes, get tackles, do your job. That's what he's done. That's why this defense is so good. Jordan Mosley's been a great field general in the league and one of the best in it. Now, while yes, there's arguments for guys like Tizino that are better, the fact is if Mosley were to win DPOY at this point, nobody would really bat an eye to it because he has been such a very dependable player. He has been a very, very solid player. Whereas a lot of other guys will have a week here or a week there that they're good, Mosley's just been good the entire year. And I don't expect that to stop. If this team wants to make it to the championship game, they're going to have Mosley continue to do what he's been doing and maybe even do it even more. 55 tackles in 7 games is a really good stat line. But if he's able to rise that up to about 10 tackles a game in the playoffs against the Battlehawks, they have a shot. Now, number 3 is the Michigan Panthers. I mean, I can't move them to 2, but they're clearly in a tier by themselves now. This is no longer a tier of top 2, next 3, and then the bottom 2. It is clearly you have a top 2, the Panthers, the next 2, and then I guess the Renegades as well, and then the bottom 2. The Panthers are clearly the 3rd best team in the league, and it's by a pretty wide margin at this point. Look, people keep saying about how the Brahmas beat them. We've talked about it before. Just to quickly rehash, if both these teams played today, the Panthers win. Now, again, we can't say for certain until they do play again, which may be in the championship game. When you look at the Panthers, they had to play their 2 backup quarterbacks, or their 3rd and 4th string guys. Lewerke didn't really play all that well, but when you look at what Perkins did, Perkins was really, really solid. 11 of 13 for 116 yards is a great stat line, and he had 2 rushes for 13 yards. Matt Colburn went off. You know, West Hills had that crazy game? Well, Colburn had one. 16 carries for 137 yards, including a 53-yard long. This team's rushing attack is the 2nd best in the league. They're averaging an insane 4.7 yards per carry. Their 13 rushing TDs is the most in the league. Their 119.6 rushing yards per game, as I said, is the 2nd best in the league. And their defense is up there. 3rd best in points allowed and one of the best in overall yardage. They just stopped the defenders. Look, I get it. There was issues with the defenders' quarterback room due to injuries, getting pass rush and all that. Panthers did their job. They went into D.C., they went into Audi Field, they've only lost 1 game ever, and they said, nope, we're going to do it to you as well. And they beat D.C. This is a game that Michigan was originally favored in, and people kept betting on D.C. People seem to act like now in hindsight, Panthers were clearly a better team. The betting line shifted to make D.C. the favorite by a decent margin. Michigan went in there and did their job and easily won this game. It was not close. Jake Bates did not have to be great. He still was great, but he didn't have to be. The Panthers are the third best team in the league. Again, it's not even close. They are clearly a bit below the top two, but even then it's only a little bit, but they're clearly better than the rest of the league. They're in this really, really weird spot where you can't put them above the top two teams until they beat one of them, but they're clearly head and shoulders better than everyone else behind them. The fact is if Ettling's injury ends up making him have to wait one more game to return, it's not going to matter. Even though I don't expect Perkins to be nearly as good due to, the whole thing I've talked about before. A guy that comes in at first is usually a lot better than he is later. The only reason I don't say that for Hogan is Hogan has a lot of experience. But the fact is that if or when Ettling comes back, this team's going to be even better. Look, we didn't even realize that, hey, Frank Gidna didn't play. That's what was scary. If you're a fan of any other team, especially the Stallions, the fact that you couldn't even really notice the Panthers missing Gidna shows just how good this team really is. They're number 3. But their MVP it's Jake Bates. I mean, who else? Look, Jake Bates is literally the only guy in the MVP race that isn't Adrian Martinez. It's just them. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that whoever gets the 1 seed in the USFL conference probably gets MVP. The only way that wouldn't happen is if, let's say, in week 10 it ends up not mattering, but Bates hits a 55 walk-off to beat the Stallions, then yeah, he probably wins it. He's first in field goals made. He is 5th in field goal percentage and points, but that points is in the entire league. He's first in kicking points, but 5th in overall points in the league, and this is a league that counts passing TDs as stats for the quarterback. He's made multiple 60-yard kicks. He's made the most in the entire league. He's made 3 this season to this point. That's insane. He's a monster. I mean, what can I say? He may not have made a ton of kicks so far. I mean, 15 is still a lot. But most of his kicks are 50-yarders or farther. I mean, this dude's a monster. He missed 2 kicks against the Showboats. So if you eliminate the 1 bad game he had, he's a perfect kicker who's perfect at 60-yard field goals and perfect at everything that's long. This is an incredible story. He went to a grass field. He dominated. The fact is he very well could be the league MVP. He is going to be Special Teams Player of the Year, unless he wins MVP. He just has to be. He is so clear head and shoulders above better than every other Special Teams player, it's crazy. Because yes, while we have seen a couple other guys kick 60-yarders, it's oh my god, he kicked a 60-yarder. Bates has done it multiple times this season where it's not really that big a deal. And he still has kicked the longest in the league's history at 64. He is clearly the team MVP. He is that dude. He is Jake Bates. Number 2 is the St. Louis Battlehawks. I mean, you barely lost to the Stallions at Birmingham. I mean, what can I really say? I said the only way that they go down is if Michigan blew out the Defenders, which I do say they did, and if the Birmingham Stallions blow out the Battlehawks, which did not happen. Look, I know people are going to say, we made mistakes that were bigger impact. No, both teams made a bunch of key mistakes. This wasn't a one team clearly made more mistakes. They both made a lot of mistakes. At the end of the day, though, the Battlehawks did have a shot to win the game, and what ended up happening is they couldn't get the job done. Sadly, this was a bad A.J. McCarron performance. 19 of 32, 161 yards, 1 TD, 1 interception, 59 completion percentage. Now, yes, I know what you're going to say. But it was the receiver's route that wasn't great and all that. Even if you eliminate the interception, 19 of 32 for 161 is a bad stat line. Look, I've talked about it before. Everybody gave so much hate to Luis Perez for being a quote-unquote game manager, but he's throwing the ball. A.J. McCarron has an even better receiving core, and for some reason he just doesn't throw it. And when it does happen, it sometimes works, usually to Hakeem Butler. That's neither here nor there. The Battlehawks' rushing attack wasn't all that great. Jacob Sayles was still solid, 3.8 yards per carry, 10 attempts. Solid, not incredible, but solid. Again, the issue is that the passing just wasn't there. Look, they got outshined in overall yards by 135. That's why I say that the mistake argument isn't there. The Stallions were the better team. They just were. Now, it wasn't like they were the better team like how Michigan was head and shoulders better than DC. No, it's just that Birmingham was a better team. 7 of 11 on third down versus 4 of 12. That shows a better team. 5.6 yards per play versus 4.4. That shows a better team. Red zone complete percentage was basically the same, 3 of 5 and 3 of 4. Both had 1 turnover, and hell, St. Louis is the one that actually scored off the turnover. But at the end of the day, Birmingham got the W. They were more clutch. Their quarterback outplayed McCarron to a point where McCarron really cannot win MVP at this point. He just can't. Adrian Martinez fully outplayed him. It wasn't even close, which is the crazy part. Martinez, especially that last drive, went off. The MVP race is now Jake Bates and Adrian Martinez, and that's basically it. Look, the Battlehawks are still clearly the second best team in the league. This is the game we all expect to be the championship, and it's going to be crazy. St. Louis at home against Birmingham should be an incredible game. But at the end of the day, this game proves what people have been trying to say for the whole season to those who were putting the Battlehawks at 1. You cannot put the Battlehawks, and should not have ever put the Battlehawks above Birmingham at any point this season, because Birmingham hadn't lost. And they still haven't. St. Louis will never be better than Birmingham until Birmingham loses. When that happens, St. Louis is going to be the best team in the league. Unless they both get, shocked in the title games and it ends up being like the Brahmas versus Panthers, of course. But overall, the are the second best team in the league. Yes, they lost to the Panthers in week 1. At this point, they are clearly the second best team in the league. They are not as good as the Stallions, but they are better than the Panthers. At home, St. Louis can beat Birmingham. That's why that title game is going to be such a big deal. It's going to be the better team in the Stallions having to come to the incredible home field advantage of the Battlehawks. That's why that game is going to be must-watch if it is, in fact, the title game. But we'll see. St. Louis number 2. Now, their team MVP does have to be McCarron. Now, I wouldn't say it has to be, but it's hard to put somebody else because early on in the season it was Marcel Aitman. Then that was Darius Shepard, the middle few weeks. Then the past few weeks it's been Hakeem Butler. So I can't really pick one receiver, so I'm just going to go with AJ. AJ's stats are great. Second in yards, first in TDs, third in passer rating, tied for fourth in interceptions, which is bad. Third in completion percentage, but seventh in yards per pass. Here's the thing that I know Battlehawks fans might not like to hear. McCarron's a game manager. Look, people seem to think that's a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a bad thing when you call somebody that in a negative way. But McCarron is a game manager. He is not the guy that's going to go sling the rock 30 times, 10 plus yards downfield. He doesn't have to. He doesn't do it. Even though he should do it to some degree with the receivers he has, he doesn't. He is a completion guy. He throws short passes. He's not insane. Proof is yards per pass. Despite having all those guys I mentioned, he is still behind guys like Luis Perez, behind guys like Adrian Martinez in that stat, despite that quote-unquote best receiving core in the entire league, which I do agree with. It is the best. But despite having that, he's so far down. Now, that does show a lot of maturity in why he is a game manager. He knows how to play the quarterback position. He knows how to get the ball to his receivers. It's just that when you're in a time where you have to go score a touchdown in less than, a minute, and you're not really used to throwing the ball downfield to the degree you should be, there's your issue. There's why guys like Martinez can do it. Why even Chase Garbers could do it. McCarron, we don't know if he can do that. He got his team to field goal range against the Renegades, but the Renegades are yikes, they really don't count in fourth down stuff. But yes, McCarron is the team MVP. Clearly is. Team is number 2. And then number 1 is the Birmingham Stallions. I'm not going to bore you by showing you how they're first in almost every single stat. I'm going to just go over what Martinez did. 21 of 33. That's 230 yards over the air. 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 64 completion percentage. I.e. was the much better quarterback, especially when you consider his 60 yards on the ground on 7 carries. Ricky Person had another solid game. CJ Maribel had another solid game. They won. They're number 1. Let's just go move on to the team MVP, which is, of course, Adrian Martinez, the favorite to win league MVP. Again, the only way he doesn't is if Jake Bates kicks basically a walk-off field goal against Birmingham to basically take the 1 seed. Martinez is leading the league in rush yards, despite having not even played in every single game. Remember, he may have appeared in them. This dude has only started 4 games, and he leads the entire league in rushing yards. He's also leading the league in passer rating and yards per pass. Now, he is 8th in completion percentage, but that's not too big an issue when you're tied for 10th in interceptions because you've only thrown 1. You're tied 2nd in passing TDs, and you're 3rd in passing yards. Clearly the best quarterback in the league. Look, I didn't want to hype up any of these guys that hadn't, played spring football before, but at this point, it's pretty clear Martinez is unarguably the best QB in the league. I mean, it's to a point where it's by The only argument you can make is if Perez was on either St. Louis or Birmingham, which fair. If he's on either of those two teams, maybe he's putting up passing-wise better numbers. But as an overall quarterback, Martinez is the best. Look, he outplayed McCarron with his arm. He didn't even need his legs. But when he did need to run, he did run and he ran well. He's the best QB in the league. He's the team MVP. It's just, what else is there to say? So yeah, that'll do it. And like you can see, the power rankings didn't change at all for me. I'm going to be real with you. I didn't see any game that made me go, yes, I have to change it. To me, if I changed any of them, it just wouldn't feel right. I don't think that DC should move down because Arlington got a huge win over a team that's been getting blown out week after week. It doesn't make sense to put them above them. It really doesn't. People are overrating that win. Again, it was against a team that just has done nothing but get blown out. So it's more like the Renegades did what they were supposed to do. Whereas when you look at a team like the Brahmas, yes, I could see why you'd move them down, but at the same time, they're still a team that is very much controlling their own destiny in the playoffs to the point where they can clinch next week. They made a great coaching move by putting in their backup quarterback. It's hard to go against a team that makes good coaching decisions, whereas a team like the DC just continues to do bad coaching decisions, going for timeouts that they shouldn't do, challenging things for no reason. So overall, that'll do it. This has been ZomFox. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified as soon as I upload any videos. And think about becoming a channel member for as low as 99 cents a month. You'll get access to an exclusive video every single month, as well as team emojis, many other perks as well. And as always, guys, have a great night.